Archaeologists digging near Chanchan, Peru, found footprints still pressed into ancient mud belonging to over 140 children, ages 5 to 14, who had walked roughly 1,000 feet from the city to where trained executioners were waiting. Their chests were opened in single clean cuts across the sternum. Their faces had been painted red with cinnabar. The Chimu Empire ordered this around 1450 C because a catastrophic El Niño flood was destroying the coastline, and the working theory was more children. This is not legend. It was excavated between 2011 and 2016 and published in a peer-reviewed journal. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Every civilization in human history has had to figure out what to do with dead bodies, and almost all of them arrived at answers that get significantly worse the more closely you examine them. Today, on Dumb Ages, we are ranking the most disturbing burial practices ever documented, from a Viking funeral that makes the movie version look tasteful, to a Japanese monk who drank poison for years on purpose, to a 2,400-year-old man from Denmark whose last meal was a winter porridge of barley and 40 types of wild seeds, and who is, unfortunately for everyone involved, still on display in a museum. Let's start at the top of the list and work our way down into the mud. Number 8. The man who ate porridge and died anyway. On May 8, 1950, two peat cutters named Viggo and Emil Højgaard were working the Bjelskovdal bog in Denmark, about 12 kilometers west of Silkeborg, when they hit something at a depth of 2.3 meters. It was a man. A whole, disturbingly well-preserved man, with stubble on his chin and an expression of profound calm, which is remarkable, because he had a leather rope tied around his neck. This is Toland Man. He died sometime between roughly 405 and 384 BC. He was about 40 years old, and he stood 161 centimeters tall. The rope was not decorative. He was hanged. Now here is the detail that makes this beautifully, specifically Scandinavian. Researchers examined the contents of his stomach and reconstructed his final meal, eaten 12 to 24 hours before he died. It was porridge, a responsible seasonal winter into spring porridge of 6-roed barley, pale persicaria, and flax, containing something like 40 different types of seed. This man ate the single most sensible and depressing breakfast in recorded history, a bowl of grain, and roughly the entire contents of a field mice menace. And then, fully fortified with fiber, got hanged and dropped into a bog for 2,500 years. And it gets better. His original head is on display at the Silkeborg Museum today. But the body attached to it? That's a replica, built in 1987. So the museum has the authentic 2,400-year-old head of a hanged man, mounted on a body younger than the compact disc. He deserved better. He got a gift shop. Number 7. Please send vultures a Zoroastrian love story. In Zoroastrian tradition, a corpse is considered impure, and burial or cremation would contaminate the sacred earth or fire. So the solution was, frankly, elegant. Don't bury the body. Feed it to the sky. The Dakma, or Tower of Silence, is a circular elevated stone structure about 25 feet high, and the dead are laid out on top, exposed to the open air, and more importantly, to vultures. When the vulture population is healthy, a body is stripped clean in under 30 minutes. The layout is organized with a strange tidiness: 3 concentric rings, men on the outer ring, women in the middle, children in the innermost. Afterward, the sun-bleached bones are gathered and placed in a central pit with lime. The practice shows up as early as Herodotus around 450 BCE, and purpose-built towers are documented from the 9th century onward. Mumbai's Dongarwadi Tower was built in 1672 and is still in use by the Parsi community. And this is the world's most efficient funeral: no land, no smoke, ecologically flawless, until a single painkiller broke the entire thing. Starting in the 1990s, Indian livestock were given a drug called diclofenac, and vultures that fed on those carcasses suffered fatal kidney failure. By 2008, India's vulture population had collapsed by more than 97%. India banned the veterinary drug in 2006, but the birds have recovered painfully slowly. which leaves a grim modern problem. A funeral system engineered around 30-minute service now has no staff. The system works perfectly. Nobody showed up to eat. Number 6. The widow's send-off, sponsored by the in-laws. Sati was the practice of a Hindu widow being burned on her late husband's funeral pyre. The earliest inscriptional evidence comes from a 510 sea stone inscription from Iran, in India, describing a wife entering into the mass of fire. And for most of history, it existed as scattered incidents until the record-keeping starts, and the numbers get genuinely alarming. In 1803, the missionary William Carey documented 438 separate sati incidents within a 30-mile radius of Calcutta. In 1 year, picture a man with a clipboard reaching 438 and simply continuing. Between 1815 and 1818, the documented count in the Bengal Presidency nearly doubled, from 378 to 839. At which point the colonial administration essentially looked at the trend line and said, "All right, we are legislating this." Lord William Bentinck banned the practice on December 4, 1829, via Regulation 17. And you might file this under solved, ancient, over. It is not. In September 1987, an 18-year-old woman named Roop Kanwar died by sati in the village of Deorala, in Rajasthan's Senis, reportedly just 8 months after her wedding. Between 1943 and 1987 minus 44 years, India had officially recorded only about 30 cases. And then this one happened, in living memory, and the outrage was so immediate that it produced new national law within weeks, the Rajasthan Ordinance that October, and the Commission of Sati Prevention Act the same year. This is the recurring lesson of this list. None of it is as far away as you want it to be. Number 5. The angel of death does not miss. In the year 922, an Arab diplomat named Ahmad ibn Fadlan was traveling along the Volga River when he encountered a group of Norse traders, the Senik, and the funeral of one of their chieftains. He wrote the whole thing down in his account, the Risala, and you can feel him processing it in real time, like a man who came for a trade negotiation and got something else entirely. When the chieftain died, a slave girl volunteered to accompany him into the afterlife, which sounds voluntary right up until you learn what volunteering involved. Over 10 days, she was given intoxicating drink, and she was required to have ritual sex with all of the male mourners. Then came the ceremony itself. She was lifted up 3 times to peer over a doorframe, and each time she described a vision of paradise on the other side, her ancestors, her master, a green and pleasant land. It's a doorframe. She's narrating a vision tour over a doorframe. And presiding over all of it was an old woman whom Ibn Fadlan says the Norse called the Angel of Death. Once the visions were done, the Angel of Death strangled the girl while stabbing her between the ribs, and then the whole assembly was cremated aboard the chieftain's ship. Somewhere in the historical record is a diplomat's face, and it is not okay. The title alone, the Angel of Death, a fixed job with an incumbent, tells you this was not improvised. Number 4. You're invited to the pharaoh's afterlife, and you don't get a vote. Let's go to Egypt, First Dynasty, around 3050 BCE, to the tomb of Pharaoh Djer at Abydos. Djer was buried with 318 retainers inside his tomb Mykonus, servants killed to serve him after death Mykonus, and another 269 in the surrounding enclosures. Added up, 587 people, escorted into the next world on his schedule. And here's the part that reads like a corporate quarterly report, gone wrong. His predecessor, Aha, was buried with only 35 retainers, and of the 12 identifiable men in his surrounding tombs, all were about 20 years old, possibly his personal guard. So under Djer, the headcount didn't just grow, it exploded, from 35 to nearly 600. How did they die? The experts disagree, which is its own kind of unsettling. Forensic anthropologist Nancy Lovell points to strangulation, based on a pinkish staining on the teeth. Archaeologist Matthew Adams argues for poisoning, because there's no skeletal trauma. Either way, quiet, tidy, no struggle. But here's the genuinely fascinating twist. This practice existed only during the First Dynasty, roughly 3100 to 2900 BCE. and then it was abruptly abandoned. King Kwa, the last pharaoh of that dynasty, went to his tomb with about 30 retainers danced down from Jer's 587. You can watch the trend line rise, peak, and then collapse, as if an entire civilization slowly arrived at the thought, you know what? Maybe not. Even ancient Egypt eventually looked at the numbers and quietly discontinued the product. Number 3. The Scythians built a zombie cavalry and left it outdoors. For this one, our source is Herodotus, in Book 4 of his Histories, describing the Scythians around the 5th century BC, and for centuries people assumed he was exaggerating, because what he describes is insane. When a Scythian king died, the first wave was almost restrained by this list's standards. One concubine, plus his butler, his cook, his groom, a servant, and his messenger, all strangled and buried with him. Staffing solved. But then you wait a year, and on the anniversary they killed 50 of his finest young warriors and 50 of his best horses. The horses were gutted, stuffed with chaff, and sewn back up. Then they were mounted on wooden frames, propped upright as if alive, and each of the 50 dead warriors was impaled on a stake driven up through the spine to the neck and fixed onto a horse. Sit with the logistics. Somebody had to plan this. 50 horse and rider units, taxidermied and installed in a ring around the king's burial mound, mean a silent, motionless cavalry standing guard, circling the tomb forever. And for a long time this was written off as Greek tall-tale nonsense. Except, archaeology keeps confirming the horse part. At the Kostromskaya Kurgan, excavators found 22 horse skeletons arranged in a circle. At the Arzan Kurgan in Tuva, Siberia, over 160 horses were buried with the ruler in full ceremonial regalia, gold-plated bridles, and antlered headdresses. And as recently as 2024, an excavation of a 2,800-year-old mound in Siberia turned up 18 sacrificed horses buried alongside one elite woman. Herodotus, the man everyone accused of making it up, keeps quietly being right. Number 2. The monks who mummified themselves from the inside out. This one is a horror film with a 3-act structure, and every act is worse than the last. In the Yamagata region of northern Japan, mainly from the 11th through the 19th centuries, certain Shingon Buddhist monks pursued Sokushin Butsu, becoming a Buddha in this body. Not being mummified after death. Mummifying yourself, alive, over a process lasting around 3,000 days. Act 1. The tree-eating diet. For years, the monk eats only nuts, bark, seeds, and berries, with the specific goal of stripping every gram of fat from his body, because fat rots. Act 2. It escalates. The monk moves to progressive fasting and begins drinking a tea brewed from the sap of the urushi tree, the lacquer varnish tree, which is toxic. This is the point. The poison saturates his body so that after death, insects won't touch it. He is embalming himself from the inside while still using himself. Act 3. Entombment. The monk is sealed alive inside a stone chamber barely large enough to sit in, with a single bamboo tube for air and a small bell. Each day he rings the bell to signal he is still alive. And one day the bell doesn't ring. Then they seal the tube. And the button on this one is perfect. The Meiji government criminalized the practice in 1877, officially condemning it as depraved after roughly 800 years of it being tolerated. But the last known practitioner, a monk named Bukai, completed the ritual anyway, illegally, in 1903. His remains were exhumed by Tohoku University in 1961 and are now on display at the Kanzeonji Temple in Fukuoka. Yamagata region alone is home to 13 of these self-made mummies. 13 men who succeeded at the single most difficult thing a human being can attempt, which is to become a corpse on purpose and get the timing exactly right. And now the comedy stops. Number 1. 140 children, 200 llamas, and one very bad rainstorm. We opened here, and now you have the context to understand why it sits alone at the top. The site is Huanchaquito Las Llamas, on the northern coast of Peru, dated to roughly 1400 to 1450 C, excavated by Gabriel Prieto of the Universidad Nacional de Trujillo and John Verano of Tulane University between 2011 and 2016. It is the largest known single-child sacrifice event in the entire New World. More than 140 children, aged 5 to 14, the majority between 8 and 12, both boys and girls, and over 200 juvenile llamas, all under 18 months old. Radiocarbon dating confirmed it was one event, not a tradition spread across generations. One day, the children's faces were painted with red cinnabar. Their chests were opened with what the researchers describe as consistent, efficient, transverse cuts across the sternum, no hesitation marks, which tells the archaeologists these were trained hands doing this again and again. And there are the footprints. Preserved in the mud, small footprints showing that the children walked, on their own feet, roughly 1,000 feet from the city of Chan Chan to the place where it happened. And here is the detail that reframes everything, published in PLOS 1 in 2019. That thick layer of mud at the site is the fingerprint of a massive El Niño event, catastrophic flooding, tearing apart a coastal empire built on the sea. This was not old ritual. This was panic. An institution, faced with a disaster it could not stop or understand, reaching for the most valuable thing it had and destroying it, hoping the sky would notice. It didn't work. It was never going to work. And that is the real reason it belongs at number 1. Not because it is the strangest thing on this list, but because it is the most human. It is fear, doing arithmetic. Every one of these was, at the time, considered correct. Sensible, even. Which is the quiet, uncomfortable thread running under all of it, that the people doing these things were not monsters in a story. They were people solving a problem, with the tools and the certainties they had. Which raises a question worth sitting with, 500 years from now, when someone digs up how we handle our dead, our disasters, and our fears. What, exactly, do you think they'll rank number 1? Sleep on that. And on Dumb Ages, we will see you in the next one.